Good morning. So we got most of the stuff done yesterday to get the cases ready for assembly next time I can get back down here. So we're just doing some wrap up stuff today and finishing up some of the smaller things like putting the stator back into the left side case, and because that has to get Loctited and with a new seal in it. So we're gonna wrap this up, and that way when this is all done and it comes time for that step, we'll just bolt the whole cover back onto the case and make it move a lot smoother than having to fiddle with all this little stuff on that day. So one interesting thing about the CRF 450R is it actually has a pressurized oil supply going to the crankshaft, and how it does that is this recess in here is pressurized with oil, and then this seal is going to get put in there, and that seal comes onto the crankshaft here, and through that hole right there it gets an oil supply, and there's an internal passage drilled into this, and it feeds oil into the lower rod bearing there. And I just thought that was a really good idea. But we're gonna get this stator bolted back in there and Loctited everything in place so that, like I said, when it comes next week, we're putting it together. It was bolted on as a unit. That we're at the halfway point. So I usually call the halfway point when obviously everything's cleaned up, disassembled, cleaned up, ready to get put back together, and then the first bag you open to actually put something back together, that's a halfway point. So we're halfway done with the build. The first one was the crankshaft oil supply seal and its snap ring, and as you can see, snap rings back in there, and that's pretty cool. Been putting in a lot of work on this project, and we're actually halfway there. So I was trying to find my way. I was thinking my mind was made, but you were making a hard change. It's all that I can take. Alright, so we're all wrapped up and ready for engine assembly. So here we got the bench of parts, everything laid out and protected. I'm going to be covering everything that's exposed now so that no FM gets in there. We got the cylinder head, valves installed, ready to go. The cam components and all the timing set up. Those are those new rocker shafts that I got from Honda for the ones that I found that were kind of worn. The transmission, I'm not going to be taking apart the actual gear set. What happened, there's a lot of snap rings inside here, and they're really only meant to be used once. So once you expand them to get them off of the shaft, you're really not supposed to use those again. So since there's nothing wrong with the transmission when it was running, I cleaned up the bores or the shafts a little bit from where they're going to do their sealing, like right here on the counter shaft. Cleaned it up as best I could, and there shouldn't be any problem with that. So I'm going to leave those like they are. All the clutch, we're going to be reusing the clutch since there was nothing wrong with it. And the basket inspection was really good. I'll give you guys a better shot of that when we're installing it. But there's actually, for almost 100 hours, I'm not really abusive with the clutch, so there was almost nothing wrong with the clutch fingers. This is all the bolts for the engine. They all go in this pan. The bolts for the rest of the bike, they're in that drawer I showed you before. And so kind of comes all as a unit. So whenever we put this engine back together, all the bolts for everything inside are processed, cleaned, and ready to go in here. Here's the case half that we put all the bearings in, brand new bearings yesterday. So that's ready to go. The other case half, this is our new cylinder that we're going to be installing. Here's the old cylinder with the new piston set up in here. And then of course the water pump, the right side cover, and there's that alternator that we just put together. I have the cylinder inspection reports, and I'm going to go over those with you guys. So we did a full evaluation of the old cylinder and then the new cylinder and vertex piston that's going into the Motard. So we're not going to be using the old cylinder as I predicted. We are, when I went ahead and bought that new cylinder to match with the brand new piston, that was actually a good idea. So the old cylinder and the bottom, it's out of spec. And the spec for an OEM Honda cylinder on a 450 is 37805. The standard, it should be 3.7795 to 7801. And my own personal debate about this, I feel this is a little bit limiting. So you're only, your max standard is 37801 and your service limit's 37805. That's only 4 10,000s. So I just feel that's a really narrow band. But however, the engineers at Honda know more than me. So we had the most wear in the bottom of the stroke, which is where you're going to expect to have the most wear. As that piston is changing direction and being forced into the side of the wall because of the offset crank design. So at the bottom we had a 37807 and 809. As you can see, that's greater than the 805 limit, with our largest bore size being 37826 at the top of Bravo plane, and our average of 37806. For the brand new cylinder with the Vertex piston, the brand new cylinder actually came from Honda out of spec. So we had at the bottom of the Bravo plane, we had a 37808, and that's bigger than 37805. So it's not perfect, but that's a very close tolerance. I mean, look, they're all 37880s, and that's, we're in the 10,000s range. So, it's just good data to have, but not really a problem for this. So the largest bore size was, of course, at 37808, and our average of 37804, which 37804 is still within the limit of their service limits. For the piston on the old cylinder, like I said, we had 82.6 miles on a stock OEM piston. The measured ring gap that came out of the engine was 12 thousandths, and the service limit for the ring gap is actually 13 thousandths. So the ring gap was in spec. So that was one of the other contributing factors as to why the motor did not burn any oil really at all, because we had a good ring gap. For the piston, the one that came out, we had piston to cylinder wall clearance on the dome of 19 thousandths, and then on the skirt 2.3 thousandths. The brand new piston, I have not done the ring gap yet, and we'll get to that upon engine assembly. I'll ensure that the ring gap is set right. I haven't really looked at the piston yet to see what it calls out for, because the ring gaps on a forged aftermarket piston are going to be different than the stock OEM product. So once we get into that and I read the instructions, I'm predicting it's going to be something around 16 thousandths piston ring gap, but I'll get to that day. So the brand new piston, we measured out a cylinder wall clearance at the dome of 18.5 thousandths and at the skirt 1.7. So that's pretty good. And like I said, in comparison to the old one to the new, so the old skirt had 2.3 and the new one had a 1.7, and then the old one for the dome was 19.6 to 18.5. So piston looks good. And then we have the taper and outer roundness measurements. So taper is kind of like how much the cylinder looks like a Dixie cup, because it should look like a graduated cylinder, perfectly straight. There should be no taper in the bore of the cylinder, the pistons are designed to be tapered because during operation, the top of that piston is going to heat up quite a bit more than the bottom, and it's actually going to grow and expand and become straight. So that's why they're manufactured. So that's why that piston has a taper to it. You know, like I said, we measured the skirt at 2.3, you know, and almost 20 thousandths of taper from the top to the bottom. It's quite a bit. So anyway, the cylinder bore taper on the one that came out, we had 13 and 17, and that's no good. The service limit for taper is 4 10,000ths. So on the new piston, I'm sorry, the new cylinder, we had 2 and 4, which is really good. I mean, that thing is almost straight up and down. So service limit being a 4, so it's within the service limits. For the out of roundness, so you're gonna wear the bore more in the Bravo thrust plane as opposed to the pin thrust plane, because that pin keeps the cylinder, the pin keeps the piston straight in the bore, and it's allowed to kind of rock in that other plane, the thrust plane I call it. So that's why this picture is kind of oval on purpose, showing you where you're expecting it to be oval, and we call that out of round. So I measure them at 3 different spots, the top, mid, bottom, and the out of roundness for the old one was 32, 0 in the middle, and 2 at the bottom. And then for the brand new cylinder, it was 1 at the top, and 5 in the middle, and 3 10,000ths at the bottom. So it's pretty good.